Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. This episode of Slam the Gavel is sponsored by CPS Protect Consulting Services. A child protective services case is one of the most frightening experiences for any parent. Don't face it alone. Face it with confidence with Urgent Assist by CPS Protect. You can have access to former CPS investigators to make sure you preserve your rights and protect your family. If you're facing CPS involvement and aren't sure where to turn, their child welfare consultants can help you. Visit cpsprotect.com/subscribe and enter the coupon code SLAMTHEGAVEL for 60% off your first year of Urgent Assist. And this is available in all 50 states. I have another announcement. Bradley's mother, Narcus Golan, passed away in the fall of 2022. Bradley is autistic and needs structured routine and therapies he receives for his autism 6 days a week. However, Italy just entrusted Bradley to Italian social services. If he is ruled to go back, he will then face the next 3 to 4 years in the Italian foster care system where he can't speak or understand the language. He will then be taken away from the only family he has ever known. Please call Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390 to please keep Bradley here safe in these United States. That's Governor Hochul, 518-474-8390. That's hashtag Keep Bradley Safe. One last announcement. Go to the site, pleasedoyourjob.com. We need 2,500 more signatures to get a case reopened. That's pleasedoyourjob.com. I have a return guest. I'm happy to have my friend on, Kenneth Vignali on. He was last on season 4, episode 39 and 85. And we had talked about a lot of things. We had talked about the signature peace of mind in discussing phishing, AI, and the importance of a UB key. But we're going to talk about updates on a case he's been working on and CPS law enforcement and other things involving children sending inappropriate photos out. So I welcome you, Ken. Good morning.
Good morning, Marianne. Thank you so much for bringing me back on your show.
I'm glad to have you back on. There's still more we have to talk about, because you had just joined the International Association of Privacy Professionals. So how did you come upon that?
They've been, an industry group for many, many years. And what I really value, out of a lot of industry groups, it's not necessarily specific to family court or whatever. It's an organization, right, that tracks and provides updates and they advocate for different privacy related legislation around the world. They provide training and things like that. But like a lot of industry groups, they have subgroups, people that have special focuses. So I joined them this past year because with a lot of families, right? So well, since COVID, right, a lot of schools have started allowing kids to bring Chromebooks home and things like that. So with the disparate laws on the books right now, things are in the works around the country. Even I wanted to better acquaint myself and try to stay on top of these trending topics. And then what I really value is being able to have yet another potential group of people that I can speak to, professionals that I can coordinate with. I can work with them on certain cases, right, involving privacy law violations, especially when it comes to schools and student privacy. And there's a lot of different legislations out there. But anyways, so it's a good group, very large group. And I joined them to just further educate myself and provide more resources for my clients. So it's all about growing your network and getting out of your comfort zone and trying to be well versed on different topics.
And there's so many of them, which is scary.
There are. So I primarily joined. Well, there are a couple of reasons, but I primarily joined because of the wealth of information they have around different laws like COPA and different things currently on the books for student privacy. So, I felt it was definitely very important with the kind of work that I'm involved in, to become more acquainted, with that area. Not, it's impossible to be an expert in everything, but, I wanted to grow my network. I wanted to, meet people that had these specialties, right, with the law backgrounds and that I could, consult with for different cases I'm involved in. So, they're a very good, positive group
Oh,
doing a lot of good things.
well, that's really, and then, you know, again, we've talked about this before. We got parents posting their kids as they grow up on Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat. And I've
Yes.
always said this is not a good idea, but apparently everyone thinks it's still a great idea.
No, yeah, I mean it's normal, right? I mean it should be normal to be proud of your kids and want to share their accomplishments, their key milestones they're hitting. But unfortunately, in the fallen society we live in, right, there's just while you can use technology for good, there's a lot of ways to take advantage of people, right? So there's a lot of issue with artificial intelligence, for example. That's a very hot button issue across a lot of a lot of industries. But with artificial intelligence, for example, with generative AI, and there are different platforms, that perverted people are using to scrape the internet of these pictures and create, uh, uh, child CSAM, right? Child sexual assault imagery. So I know there's a lot of people in law enforcement and federal agencies trying to combat this, but for my company specifically, I try to, I've partnered with companies like Canopy. They've got an artificial intelligence based tool that can go on your phone, go on your computer. This is not a paid advertisement, by the way, but just speaking to, while there is a lot of bad, there's a lot of ways you can, as a parent, with a child that has a phone or a computer, try to put in some controls around it. Making sure, they're not sharing inappropriate photos themselves, right? That could be leveraged to put them in, really bad situations. So, I've taken a lot. I know there are other organizations that do a lot of good training for families. I'm trying to do the same thing, trying to provide them with the education, the awareness, even tools that I've personally tested out. I've got a family of my own. So, before I, encourage anybody to use anything, I test it out thoroughly myself, and test drive it. And it's very effective. So while it is kind of a scary, crazy world with AI, there are ways that, as a parent, you don't have to be an expert, but there is help out there. There are tools out there, um, in conversations that can happen um, to help, right? So I work with a lot of families where they're like, well, I just gave my 13-year-old access to Snapchat because all their friends are on it. So, that's just one of many platforms people can have conversations that disappear, and not leave a trace. I mean, there's digital forensics you can do, but all that being said, you can give your kids, some freedom, and then you can also share. Yeah, I mean, this is good for parents or photographers too, right?
Mhm.
Because it looks at the photo, and if it feels it's potentially too explicit in nature, right? Seemingly two-piece bathing suits. I mean, it's always up to the beholder, right? Everybody has a different perception of what's appropriate, what's inappropriate. So I think this just gives another layer of control. And Canopy, specifically, the way it works is if you have it on your phone or computer and somebody tries to send out a photo, you can set it up where the parent will be alerted. And it's great for families. I think it's great for families that may not have a good relationship with their kids or teens, right? Where they're kind of in that awkward phase of independence, and you don't want to be a helicopter parent, overbearing.
Mhm.
It's just, and if you have daughters, even, I mean, this happens to a lot of teenage boys too, statistically. But I like it because it can be a conversation starter where it's non-judgmental. Um, your kid still has their phone or device, and then if they snap a photo and try to send it out, it creates a potential opportunity to have a conversation. And I try to, I'm not a perfect parent myself, still struggle. I've got a teenage daughter, but I think it's a potentially good opportunity to, broach those sensitive conversations,
Mhm.
and be non-judgmental, right? Non-punitive or coming down. So that's the approach I work on myself and then try to talk to others about as well. So
Well, that's good because, it doesn't seem like families are communicating. Everyone's on their phone. You go to a restaurant, you see everybody is on their phone. It's
yeah, I mean,
sad.
I've been guilty of that sometimes, but I try to practice what I preach, and I try to just let people know, hey, I'm transparent, I'm not perfect. But when it comes to restaurants and things like that, yeah, it's people are very engrossed in their day-to-day lives. I am, right? We both,
Mhm.
you record a lot of great podcasts, and
Thank you.
so no, it's incredible, really. It's uh, just a quick dovetail. It's been a great tool to use it as, not like a therapy group per se, but highlighting to people I work with too that, I'm not just telling them that this happens a lot, but it helps. I've been able to see some of your guests connect in the background and create their own support groups, if you will, right? Some people still going through trials,
Mhm.
law enforcement abuse, CPS abuse, the horrors of the family court. So it's, for my one client, especially in Texas, I know she's been able to connect with a couple of other mothers that are still struggling and going through these difficult times.
Mhm.
So it's a great thing. So yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to going back to the phone thing in restaurants and public. It's definitely very hard to break away, right? Because we've got our emails, we've got our work calls, we've got all those instant messaging apps still, right?
Mhm.
Like Slack and Teams and Zoom calls, you name it. So it's like our attention is everywhere but. And the easy thing is just to give your kids phones, tablets, or put them in front of a TV. And so I think there are definitely smarter ways to go about it. Even if you don't have a choice but to give them these devices, there are some controls you can put in place and conversations you could have and should have.
Mhm.
Um, so, and then there are ways to come across as not overbearing, but you can still get alerted to potentially, you know, uh, predatory behavior. So, um, so that's my mission in life, is to try to equip families as well, because we just the fewer victims, the better, right? So, and I think a lot of anti-trafficking groups, a lot of uh, you know privacy groups and advocacy groups, they're really big on building awareness and having those conversations.
Mhm.
So if we can try to improve families, equip them with the tools they need, equip them with the knowledge and information, I think that can go a long way. Um,
Yeah.
Potentially. So I mean, you try to get them early on in the as they're growing up, and try to provide them a loving home to the best of your ability, and make sure you've got those opportunities for these difficult discussions, and hopefully your kids won't run into the arms of pedophiles and groomers and traffickers, and
Mhm.
there's just too many. I mean, it's you open the newspaper. Well, people don't read the newspaper anymore really as much, but I
Yeah.
mean, you go online and see like plenty of news stories, right, on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn if you're on there, about different stories of people in positions of trust. Boy Scouts, athletic coaches. I mean, there's too many people out there in trusted positions that are uh, just looking for those broken kids that don't know any better, or
Mhm.
feel like their families don't love them. And I've been taught, and it's been reinforced through a lot of groups I've been with, that if we can improve the family unit, and equip them and try to make it non-judgmental, um, provide those opportunities for kids to come forward without being, punished or fear that they're not going to be loved or whatever. I think that could go a long way. So, not a therapist, I'm not a licensed counselor, but these are common themes that I hear in the cases I've worked. It's a lot of people do come from loving homes. Some parents I've had close family friends where their kids decided when they were 17 or 18 that they were going to run off and be with whoever. And so it's definitely a very hard period of time to be raising a child.
Mhm. Yeah, this is a very crazy time to be bringing kids into this world and raising children. I'm so glad all mine are grown up, but
Yes.
geez. Yeah, I didn't have to worry about this stuff. I mean, I had gotten the oldest a cell phone based on the fact that, I think she was in the 5th or 6th grade, something like that, but it was
Okay.
out of necessity because, she wanted to be in plays, and
Right.
the teacher would say, "Okay, I'm letting them out at 4:30." Well, then that would turn into 5, and parents are waiting out in the parking lot. We're wondering, "Where are they? When is this?" And this was going on and on. So I got her a cell phone, but I said, "You're only allowed to call these 3 numbers. That's me, your dad, and the grandmas, okay?
Right. Right.
That is it." And if she would backtalk me or give me a hard time, I would turn off that phone for 3 days.
Okay.
And I remember her getting off the bus, and she looked at me like she was so shocked that the phone doesn't work.
Yeah, I've excuse me. No, I know a lot of families and myself included. We break down at a certain age and like, all right, you're in high school, you're in middle school, you're in all these activities, we're going to be running your siblings or whoever around. So I totally get it. I totally get it. I broke down and well, she was 13 when I first got her the phone. But yeah, they're, you know, uh, you know, providers out there, right? Phone creators that, they're not at like Verizon or AT&T, but there are ways to give a kid a phone securely. And, I tried, I Googled this and I've seen a lot of people advocating for phone contracts, right? So, hey, it's kind of like an acceptable use policy at a place of work for people that may be familiar with that, right? So, I had my daughter sign it, and there's like a lot of templates online you can look at. And hey, we read this together. You read it alone. You signed your initials next to it, and then signed it. We signed it, and if you're in violation of this, you got to have consequences, right? So it may be painful or embarrassing, but uh, we got to learn to be responsible.
Yeah,
It's a privilege, not necessarily a right.
right,
Even
right.
though, like you mentioned in your own situation, it was more of a need, right? So it's a necessity in some cases for parents, but they don't want to tell that to the kid, right? So it's definitely a privilege. That's the messaging.
Yeah, and they don't understand because I know their brains aren't fully developed until they're 26 or 42. So, I don't know.
I think we're all still learning it as we as we're all still moving along day to day. We're always learning. So
Right. So, what's going on with that case that we had Selena on, you and I, and we had talked about her case. And I think that was like last year.
no, it was well, I mean, her cases have been going on for about 2 years since I've met her, in different capacities. But when she was on your show, I think it was back in June, early June, I want to say.
Okay.
Yeah, because she had not seen her 11-year-old. She has 3 daughters, and she had not been able to see her 11-year-old daughter since the end of the school year in Texas, which was May 25th, I think it was. So, I mean, the good news is, I know it's hard to say good news, but we were able to get the uh, the malicious prosecution with the federal charges. She was fighting a federal charge for self-defense. She didn't shoot anybody.
Mhm.
Nobody was hurt. This was, a disagreement between, neighbors, that I was present for. So thankfully, we're in October now, holy cow. So about a month or so ago, towards the end of the summer, that case was wrapped up, thankfully. They dropped it down to a misdemeanor of disorderly conduct. So she's, free, to live her life, right? So in theory, she can move anywhere she wants in the country. She's not restricted. So they, uh, thankfully, through a lot of pushing back with lawyers and things like that, we were able to get that resolved. So honestly, she should have been exonerated. I know I'm partial,
Mhm.
but even looking at all of the evidence, right? That probably should have been that shouldn't have gone on as far. But in regards to the her daughter, that's I haven't spoken to her for about a week or so due to traveling and things like that. So, but she is still fighting, and the bottom line is, I've tried to talk to a senator in Texas about it. Because like a lot of your guests that are going through similar situations, I think the common theme is we just have people in these positions of power where there is little to no oversight, which is extremely, extremely dangerous as we
Oh,
see,
yeah.
in socialist and Marxist countries, China. But the bottom line is this all stemmed from family members of hers that took advantage. She does not have a good family support system, unfortunately.
Mm-mm.
Uh, and then there was a key law enforcement officer down there that took it upon himself to remove her and place her with the biological father. So the bottom line is she is still fighting to get her back. She is still trying to, leverage any legal means necessary. And unfortunately, that's backfired in a number of cases where at one point over the summer, she was temporarily illegally detained by police when she tried to pick up her daughter. She had her paperwork, she did everything right. There's a particular consulting company that, not mine, that, said, hey, if you bring your court order saying that she's, your daughter, you have sole custody and all of that, then, by law, they're supposed to, bring her back. And so the bottom line is she's done a lot of legwork as well. And what it comes down to is collusion. Yes, collusion, I think, is the theme of the show in general. The podcast where there's deep collusion between, CPS or agencies, law enforcement, and schools. They have an ungodly amount of power that should not be given to them,
Mhm.
without recourse. And then when you try to call them out like she did, she researched Texas law on because the problem right now is there's a particular CPS caseworker that's been involved since this started, um, that told the school, hey, uh, you know, she is not allowed to see her daughter or take her home or anything like that. However, my client validated with the state. She called the headquarters and they said, yeah, there was no judge's order signed, and pretty much every state, again, this is based off personal experience and other cases I've worked. Somebody can fact check me on this. I don't, I hope to be corrected, but typically in most states, my understanding is, if a child is removed in an emergency capacity from a home, they have to like go before a judge within, I think, 24 to 48 hours in a majority of states, based on my understanding, in Texas especially. So, she was taken back in May. We're in October now, and there was no court order signed by a judge saying that my client is not allowed, to see her child, nor is she allowed, she's supposed to be able to have her back. So what she's dealing with is a very, power hungry school system,
Mhm.
um, and CPS worker. So, encouraged her to do certain things to try to handle this. And then she's been trying to work with different lawyers around this, and um, it's problematic. I mean, talking to civil lawyers, right? Trying to file civil suits. The theme is, oh well, your story didn't make like local news, right? If your story didn't make the news, then we may not be interested. So I've had a lot of these calls with lawyers in Houston, especially. And I'm like, you guys are heavy hitters. Like, what is? I said, I said she's been on a podcast, a family law podcast. We've reached out to different news agencies for many months, and nobody wants to pick up the story. Unfortunately, the only time I see, again, this is impacts both genders, fathers, mothers, but when I'm talking about Houston specifically, a majority of the news stories you see are, law enforcement knew that this was a bad situation. Law enforcement, was part of the problem, but usually things don't make the story until somebody dies.
Right.
There's so many cases there, even because I follow a lot of this trending. And unfortunately, there's so many stories where it's like, we knew the father was bad, we knew the mother was bad, but unfortunately, one of the partners ends up getting murdered. And so, that's why, I've tried to take up this cross with my client, Selena, Cynthia, because I just, I can't save everybody. I'm not a lawyer, unfortunately, so I can't take it to that level, but I can advocate, I can provide evidence, I can be an expert witness and do all these other things. But, if I can save, it's altruistic, but if I can try to save one life, then, it's worth it. So,
Mhm.
um, I just don't like seeing people become statistics. So, I know we hear a lot about children dying in foster care and CPS custody. We see a lot of news stories around the country and the world where one partner murders another. So it's just, it's very disheartening that even lawyers won't necessarily take the case unless things got to that point.
A lawyer should take the case because House Bill in Texas 969, you probably know this, right? The House Bill 969 for custodial interference.
Yes.
And
Yes.
then there was another one that piggybacked onto that, and I can't think of the numbers, but is made up time or make back time, or I can't remember, but
Yeah.
uh they have a lot to work with her case.
Yeah. Frankly, they do. Frankly, they do. But um, there's just a lot of um, issues with police corruption. Down there with the assault,
Mhm.
the massive abuse that they, you know, have done to her. Like when her case was resolved, her criminal case was resolved within 2 hours of her getting back home. CPS went to her door with law enforcement, and they've been surrounding her house like a SWAT situation almost daily since her other case got resolved. And she's had over 14 cases resolved in the last year with CPS alone, where they were unfounded. And I've had conversations with them. I've recorded these conversations with CPS. It's just unchecked power. And I've tried to reach out to, like I said, congressional representatives in Texas about this issue, calling out those bills that were passed. But unfortunately, Houston seems to be like a black hole of
Mhm.
justice. Like it's so bad. I know the FBI is I know good people with the FBI, but you know, I know politically it's a controversial time for even the FBI, and they've taken over a lot of cases from the HPD, Houston Police Department. I know they've literally the FBI has moved into like 10 or 11 different zip codes due to the corruption, and they're trying to break up a lot of that stuff. So it's definitely an uphill battle, um, and I don't know what it is about Houston, especially being like a black hole of justice. It's very very hard. So I know the long term goal is to get her daughter back.
Right.
Uh, you know, relocate somewhere uh, neutral, totally out of the area. So those plans have been tentatively set. It's just a matter of getting through these final battles.
Definitely. And I just want to tell people that this was podcast season 4, episode 104
Right.
with Cynthia Euphrasio and Kenneth Vignali. And that was on June 4th of this year.
Yes. Yes. Probably about a week or so after her daughter was taken illegally. So, I mean, it's legalized kidnapping. I mean, we call it what it is, call a spade a spade. So
Mhm.
you've got some bad apples in law enforcement that, do not care about the rule of law. And, they feel like they can do things unchecked. So I've had, we've spoken to captains, we've spoken to leadership in law enforcement down there, and they promise they're going to try to look into this and fix it. They never do. So it's
They're going to have to, though, because with that House Bill 969, law enforcement is going to be trained on how to handle custody orders when a parent is withholding a child from the other for the other parent's visit. So
right.
um, this can't go on forever. This can't.
No, no, it can't. I mean, I believe it's a matter of time. There's, somebody she's been trying to work with who's he's got a very public face in Houston. Especially when it comes to police brutality and things like that. So there's a little bit of there is some unorthodox means of trying to get some real attention on this that are being explored. Not violent, but trying to reach out to a lot of different people that are civil rights figures. So there's a prominent civil rights figure down there that has been engaged. So we're trying to figure out if he's going to really help her or not. So, but yeah, I mean, I think it's great that these bills were passed. Absolutely. I think like anything else, it comes down to enforcement.
Mhm.
You've got to. I think a lot of good cops out there don't like that there are bad, corrupt, law enforcement officials involved, with their agencies, and they would love to clean out the swamp, if you will, as well. So I mean, I like, there's bad apples in every organization. It just stinks because, I've got conclusive evidence that she's being held against her will. We have Discord messages that she sent to her sisters, and I've tried to present this in secure ways to people that should be able to make a difference. And fortunately, it kind of falls on deaf ears. They're like, "Oh, it's Houston. We can't." I don't know. It's like the Bermuda Triangle
Yeah.
of justice, of common sense, of just because of the facts. I mean, like, yes, I'm supporting my client, and maybe I'm supposed to be unbiased, but these are conclusive facts, right? She's being held against her will, and then her sisters found something else in her Discord account, stating that she was left alone a lot to watch the father's and girlfriend's child, and she's denied a lot of access to technology and people, and she escapes the house at night to a local park to try to get
Mhm.
space. I'm like, I'm just a major advocate for reform. I mean, if you can't, if you're really in the if you exist, right, like if CPS truly existed for the welfare of children, right, not just as a money making machine,
Mhm.
um,
Mm.
legalized kidnapping and trafficking, whatever, then you would see this and you're like, okay, yeah, we made a big mistake. She definitely needs to be back right now. So state officials are saying that there's no reason Cynthia should not have her daughter, but the challenge is local. It's hyper localized with law enforcement and schools, and things like that. So um, I know she's got an advocate within the school that she knows is that's a long term family friend. That's an award winning teacher down there, an educator. So he's trying to find different ways to get her back as well. So it's just, I mean, it's beyond heartbreaking when there's a lot of stories out there like this, and then you make some progress in a situation, and then there are these things that are just still hanging over her head. So
Yeah, it's so sad because I just did a podcast with Darlene Orvieto and Dolores Feliciano, and they spoke out on the school systems and what every parent should know. And that was season 5, episode 5. but they raised up a lot of good topics where these teachers wield such power over kids and their parents. Mm.
It's horrendous. I mean, we've got evidence in her case that, the CPS workers have said, they want the daughter hidden, like hidden, so that Cynthia cannot find her, so they can build a case against her. They did this last year as well once, and I know they're trying to get the other two girls, but they're not going to succeed. So um, it's just it's just mind-boggling. But yeah, I started listening to that specific episode you mentioned. I got to finish listening to it, but it is scary. And there's, again, I know there are a ton of good educators, a lot of good superintendents around the country, a lot of good schools and teachers and things like that. It's just, I think you have like major pockets of what your previous guest had mentioned, of people that for one reason or another just like they love this power. And even though, again, I mean, if you research, if people do their due diligence and research, what are the actual policies, and ask the legal team like Cynthia did with the current district her daughter is enrolled in. They're in explicit conflict with contradicting their own policies. So again, it comes down to human nature, a false sense of power, uh, you know,
Mhm.
that they think they can wield, and they're just causing further harm. And so I think, I know we live in a lawsuit hungry society, but I think, if you can't, go after the agencies themselves, I think, and I've spoken to some lawyers about this as a strategy. Excuse me. So again, consult your lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, but from my personal conversations with lawyers in Texas specifically, taking individual lawsuits against the specific CPS caseworker, filing as individual lawsuits against law enforcement officers that are involved is a potential avenue. So uh,
So I always say, like, sue them in their personal capacity.
yes, yeah, I think taking a civil suit out against
Yeah.
the key individuals might be a way. And I've heard that from multiple lawyers.
Mhm.
So I mean, I've seen case law where that supports that. Um, but again, it's definitely another strategy to try.
Yeah, that's because I've been told that too. Sue them in their personal capacity. It's just, but these people just don't learn. It's so hard to sue. It's also hard to find a lawyer that will help these parents when things like this weird situation with Selena that, none of that should have ever happened to begin with.
No, absolutely not. So I mean, a lot of parents are already that are going through the ringer, right, with multi years and family court, divorce court, CPS cases. I mean, people are out. I mean, everybody's out tens of thousands of dollars, right? And so when these other like issues pop up, these lawyers that can truly help, they're not cheap.
Mhm.
Some, like if you're dealing with a criminal case and you're being wrongfully prosecuted, like in our case, there was a very solid lawyer that we finally found, and he's like, hey, I can take over your case for this, and this is a pretty clear cut self defense issue. Nobody was hurt, nobody was shot, um, so it shouldn't have gone on as it did. But you've got people that like to drag out
Mhm.
the legal system. So again, yeah, I mean, there are pockets of good lawyers, but the good ones are definitely not cheap. So um, it's definitely a struggle.
Right, and even with them, they could be working hard, but then, they're faced with one continuance after another, and, it's a game, and they can only do so much and hopefully win.
Exactly, like in Cynthia's case. I mean, it dragged on. The incident happened last April, I believe, before I relocated from Texas to Virginia. And I was present there. And actually, the state, I got a subpoena from the state of Texas wanting me to testify against her. When it because it was supposed to go to trial in August, so about a month or so ago. So, anyways, I retained my own lawyer, and because I'm in a different state, there are different things, but they didn't even follow the right process, right? So, which I didn't like that they tried to pit me against, my own client. There are a lot of ethics there. So anyways, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a game of chicken, and I think in her case, I don't know if it really would have gone to trial. Now I've spoken to uh, this one criminal defense attorney down there that we were going to try to hire for her, because it is like a game of chicken, right? You look at all the evidence, and if it did go to trial, regardless if people are tired of certain issues, right? Um, there's like in her case, there was audio. There was no, police body cam footage. They turned that off when they got to her house, so they obstructed evidence there. But there was audio footage of them like assaulting her and like beating her, and it was very traumatic for her to listen to that again while we were going through discovery. So, um, so I mean, it's a huge shame. So I think, if things came out in front of a jury, I would hope that, they would rule in her favor, especially with the overwhelming evidence. But I guess they still wanted something on the books for her, so they pled it down to the misdemeanor. So I mean, she's a non-violent person. I mean, she's
Mhm.
um, anyway. So I mean, I know this happens to a lot of people, right? Once you're in the system, that could be, if you're going through a divorce. I mean, if you're going through a CPS case, it's so hard. I've heard, and I've heard this from other professionals, that once you're in the system and you've got that target on your back, it is so hard to break free of that, right? And recreate yourself and build up that reputation. Um, so yeah, I know it's a major challenge.
But like with this canopy.us, this AI is like really scary to a lot of people. People are waking up to this AI issue.
Yes, I mean, there's a lot of governing bodies trying to put legislation around it, around the responsible use of it. Again, bad people are not going to follow laws or listen to whatever governors or mayors or presidents or whoever say, whatever they say. So I like that there's a lot of work in the security industry community around it. I do, there does need to be a pause. I think in general, I'm part of different business groups, and I think in the human condition, right? We've gotten to the point we have with computers and manufacturing machines and all of that, right? Through human advancement, looking for ways to improve and enhance the way we work and streamline things. So, artificial intelligence is just another example of that, right? Just another iteration of advancement in our society. So I do have concern that a lot of people, again, this isn't really in line with the podcast, but there are a lot of professionals, right? Marketers, business coaches and things I see saying, "Hey, you really need to, if you're not using AI, you're going to fall behind." I'm like, well, we need a pause, and there's a lot of legal and privacy implications. And when it comes to your, families that may be listening to this, they're these same tools, are being used by predators and by groomers and people with ill intent, right?
Mhm.
Um, there's a lot of even adult females, that have found, an easy way to make money through adult-oriented websites. I'll leave it at that. I think we both might know it has an O and an F in it. Um, so and then they worry about, I see issues of people dealing with stalkers, So and then leveraging AI to put them in situations they weren't in. Same thing with kids. Seemingly innocent beach photo or a photo of your kid taking a bath for the first time or whatever. There's a lot of sickos,
Mm.
and while it's great to want to share that, these milestones like we first talked about, um, we really really need to think about the other side of it, right? So, once it's up there, you can't undo it. There are organizations like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and they've got some tools to try to remove content that impact, kids under 18. It can be effective when it's, a lot of these well, I know I'm rabbit, holing here, but the bottom line is once it's up there, it's hard to get back. And a lot of these websites and things are hosted on servers outside of the US, which makes it exponentially harder to pull it back. I've worked on some cases where, somebody uploaded revenge porn and the server was hosted like in the Czech Republic. I provided them all the information, this hosting company, all of the information, even the international court information, to take down this information. That was impacting a lady that runs a spa in North Carolina. I was not successful. These people were not compliant with the request. So it gets much harder when the stuff is hosted overseas. In the US, if they're on servers here, law enforcement, definitely has a much easier time taking it down. But, I think, I think putting in these gates, these checkpoints, whether it's canopy, whether it's something else, right, that can be, that final gate, that can check us before we upload something. It's like, do you really want to upload this, right? Or, it can delete it for you. So, even as adults, it could be a good thing. So, to try to reduce victims out there and reduce the amount of free content for predators to take advantage of. So, whatever we can do to reduce the number of victims is worthwhile.
Definitely. Well, I'm glad you came back on, and I'd like to have you back on again. Is there any last minute advice regarding the schools for parents to be aware of?
I think, I've learned a lot in the last several years, doing this work, and engaging with different lawyers. But I think just like your listeners already do with their family court cases, the divorce court cases, the family law, CPS, I think, researching the laws, looking at the actual, laws that the schools have to abide by where you live, looking at their policies, asking them for the policies about, how they handle, their interactions with CPS, how do they handle, what is their policy around handling, divorces, right? I mean, it's there's a lot of, situations that go on that impact kids in school. So I think just knowledge is power.
Mhm.
So not being afraid to reach out to the legal team at the school district where your kid may be at, and calling them out and getting everything documented, right? So, another thing, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. So, like in Cynthia's case, we do have phone calls that are recorded because in Texas that's legal. Every state is different. So again, I can provide recommendations on legal websites that talk about, what is legal in your state for audio recordings. But, knowledge is power. Don't be afraid to research, document, and, where possible, if you're contacting people at a school, use email, right? So email is a forensically good, solid, irrefutable, piece of communication. So it's just something else you can equip yourself and provide to your lawyer, provide to judges, saying, "Hey, here's the chain of communication." And then from a techie standpoint, you could have somebody validate that it's legitimate with timestamps and header information, email. So I think documentation is your friend.
Mhm.
Research, documentation. So because I know in a lot of cases CPS prefers just phone calls, right? So unless it's recorded, you have no evidence of what they said or what you said.
Mhm, mhm.
So recording everything you can is definitely very paramount.
Oh, definitely. Well, how can people reach you if they have any questions?
So I've recently redone my website, so hopefully it's easier to navigate. So going to signaturepeaceofmind.com. And then I am on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. So there are definitely different methods to reach out, or you can email me at kenneth@spmadvisors.net.
Okay.
So, and I'm always happy to talk to people about their situation. You know, it's a free consultation. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't charge by the minute or the hour. So, you know, I totally recognize a lot of people I work with are stretched thin financially. So, um, you know, if we can't work together necessarily, you know, I would definitely give you the information you need to be successful, and then advise as you need.
Great. Well, hey, don't jump off. I'm going to have you back on again too. So you're not
I
going.
look forward to it.
So, hey, don't jump off. Slam the Gavel's a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice Poems of Truth, and the recently released Raised by These Wolves, How Family and Federal Courts Are Failing Our Children. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube, Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, Anchor FM, and feel free to donate to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going. Thank you so much, Ken.
Thank you.